My boyfriend said, it's simply dinner with my ex. Stop being so insecure. So I let it happen. Then I showed up at the same restaurant with my own date. He ended up leaving early while his ex sat there completely bewildered. You know how they say trust your gut? Well, mine had been screaming at me for 7 months straight, but I kept hitting the snooze button. Rachel here, 31. Spent the last 9 years climbing the ladder as a construction project manager in Charlotte, pulling in $82K a year managing commercial builds, and I genuinely thought I'd found my person in Chris. This man had me convinced we were building something real from our very first coffee date. 28 years old, working as a senior mortgage lender at one of Charlotte's biggest banks, with this magnetic charm that could convince anyone to refinance at a higher rate and still thank him for it. Always talking about market trends, interest rates dropping, the perfect time to invest. The man could sell water to a drowning person, which I found impressive at first. But looking back, maybe that should have been my first warning sign. Have y'all ever been in a situation where the red flags were basically waving in your face, but you convinced yourself they were just decorative? Let me know what city you're watching from in the comments. I'm curious if this kind of thing happens everywhere or if it's just a Charlotte thing. See, Chris had this ex-girlfriend, Vanessa, who he claimed was strictly part of his professional network now. Some hotshot commercial real estate agent he dated for 2.5 years before they broke up about 10 months ago. According to him, their breakup was completely mutual. No lingering feelings, just two professionals who realized they worked better as business contacts than romantic partners. Vanessa and I understand the Charlotte market better than anyone. He'd say whenever her name came up, which was basically every other day. His phone would light up with texts from her about interest rate changes, pre-approval opportunities for her clients, upcoming networking events at those rooftop bars in Uptown. He'd take these lengthy calls with her, sometimes stretching past an hour, supposedly discussing mortgage rates and client referrals. I'd be sitting there trying to focus on my project blueprints while he paced around my living room, voice getting all animated as he talked about loan-to-value ratios and credit scores with his ex-girlfriend. At first, I tried being the cool girlfriend, the secure woman who doesn't get threatened by professional relationships. I mean, Charlotte's finance and real estate scene is incredibly interconnected, especially between lenders and agents. It made sense that they'd need to maintain connections, but something about their dynamic felt intimate. Like there was this underlying current of familiarity that went way beyond just business. The way he'd immediately grab his phone whenever it buzzed, hoping it was Vanessa with some urgent client referral. How he'd light up during their calls using this flirty tone he never used when talking to his other professional contacts. When I finally brought up my concerns, trying to approach it calmly and rationally, Chris completely turned it around on me. Rachel, you're being incredibly controlling right now, he said, giving me this look like I was some jealous teenager. Vanessa is one of the most successful commercial agents in Charlotte. Do you understand how valuable these professional relationships are for my career? I can't just cut off important industry connections because my girlfriend feels threatened. That word, threatened, hit me like a slap, because maybe that's exactly what I was feeling. But hearing him say it out loud made me question whether I was being reasonable or just insecure. I'm not asking you to cut off professional connections. I tried to explain, but the constant texting, the long personal conversations, attending every networking event she'll be at, it feels like more than business to me. But Chris had an answer for everything. He'd pull up his phone, show me their text threads, pointing out mortgage rates and property listings. See? This is all professional, Rachel. This is how the finance industry works. If you can't handle dating someone with serious networking requirements, maybe you should date someone in your construction world instead. That stung, because he knew I respected his ambition, had always supported his career goals, but he was twisting my legitimate concerns into some kind of professional jealousy. The breaking point came on a Tuesday evening when he announced almost casually while we were cooking dinner that he had plans to meet Vanessa for dinner Thursday night at that new steakhouse in Uptown I'd been dying to try. It's this incredible opportunity, he explained, chopping onions with more enthusiasm than the conversation warranted. Vanessa has this developer client who needs creative financing for a mixed-use project, and she wants to discuss how we could structure the loan package. This could be huge for both our careers. I set down my wine glass and looked at him. A dinner meeting? Just the two of you at the nicest steakhouse in Charlotte? He immediately went defensive. It's not romantic, Rachel, it's business. God, do you hear yourself right now? You're making it sound like I'm planning some secret rendezvous when I'm literally trying to close a multi-million-dollar deal. I suggested maybe I could join them, even offered to pay, said I'd love to learn more about creative financing structures, but Chris shut that down immediately. This is highly technical financial stuff, Rachel. You wouldn't understand the terminology, the regulatory requirements, the underwriting complexities we'd be discussing. It would just be awkward for everyone involved. The way he said it made me feel like some outsider who couldn't possibly comprehend the sophisticated world of Charlotte banking. Like I was too simple-minded to grasp whatever complex financial strategies he and Vanessa needed to discuss over filet mignon and Cabernet. That night, lying in bed next to him, I stared at the ceiling, wondering when exactly I'd become the villain in my own relationship, when expressing normal concerns about boundaries had somehow transformed me into this controlling, insecure woman who was sabotaging her boyfriend's professional success. That's when I decided I wasn't going to spend Thursday night sitting at home like some pathetic fool waiting for my boyfriend to come back from his business meeting. Wednesday morning hit me with this wave of determination I hadn't felt in months. I found myself scrolling through my contacts until I landed on Logan's name. Logan was 30, worked as a structural engineer, and we'd had this brief thing about a year and a half ago that never developed into anything serious because honestly, we were both too focused on our careers. But we'd always maintained this easy friendship where we could grab drinks or dinner without any weird expectations. So I called him up, and when he answered with that familiar laid-back laugh, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: genuine ease about spending time with someone. "Logan, hey, it's Rachel," I said, suddenly realizing I hadn't rehearsed what I was going to say. "I know this is random, but would you be interested in checking out that new steakhouse uptown tomorrow night? I've been wanting to try it, and I could really use some good company." He didn't hesitate. "Are you kidding? I've been trying to get a reservation there for weeks. My coworker said their ribeye is life-changing." We set it for 7:45, and for the first time in months I was looking forward to a dinner that didn't involve defending my basic relationship expectations. Thursday morning arrived, and I woke up to the sound of Chris's alarm going off at 6 o'clock, which was unusual since he typically rolled out of bed around 7:30 on workdays. I watched through half-closed eyes as he practically jumped toward the bathroom, more energetic than I'd seen him in weeks. "Early day today," I mumbled, still trying to process why he was acting like it was Christmas morning. "Just want to look sharp for tonight's meeting," he replied, but there was this undertone in his voice that didn't match the casual words. I heard the shower run for nearly 40 minutes, followed by the unmistakable sounds of extensive grooming echoing from the bathroom. Electric razor, cologne, hair product. The works. By the time he emerged, I was fully awake making coffee, watching as he laid out his outfit with the precision of someone preparing for a first date. He'd chosen his most expensive suit, the charcoal Tom Ford one he'd bought for his brother's wedding, paired with a crisp white shirt that he'd actually ironed himself. "That's quite the business outfit," I commented, trying to keep my voice neutral. "I want to make a strong impression," he said, applying this new cologne I'd never smelled before, something intense and sophisticated that probably cost more than my weekly groceries. "Vanessa mentioned the developer might join us, so I need to look the part." I watched him spend the next 30 minutes styling his hair with the kind of attention to detail I'd only seen him use for major presentations or special occasions. This wasn't his quick morning routine. This was a full production. Every hair perfectly placed, every detail scrutinized. He kept checking himself in the mirror from different angles, adjusting his tie, smoothing his jacket. I know some of you are probably screaming at your screen right now. Would you have gone to that restaurant or not? Seriously, drop your take in the comments, because I still wonder if I made the right call. "You're really going all out for a business dinner," I said, watching him apply a second coating of that expensive cologne. "Rachel, please don't start," he replied without looking away from the mirror. "I told you this is important for my career. I need to look professional when I'm meeting with Charlotte's top commercial players." But there was something about the way he said professional while adjusting his watch, the Rolex his dad gave him that he only wore on special occasions, that made the word feel like a complete lie. I'd seen Chris prepare for actual business meetings before, and this wasn't it. This was the kind of preparation he used to do when we first started dating, when he wanted to impress me, when he wanted to look irresistible. As I watched him perfect his appearance for Vanessa, I realized he hadn't put this much effort into looking good for me in months. When I mentioned I had dinner plans too, just casually while he was grabbing his keys, his reaction was immediate and telling. "Oh, with who?" he asked, suddenly very interested in my evening plans despite having shown zero curiosity about my schedule for weeks. "Logan," I said simply, watching his face change. "You remember Logan, right? We're going to try that new steakhouse uptown." The color drained from his face so fast I thought he might actually faint. "Logan, as in Logan the engineer. The one you used to—" He didn't finish the sentence, but we both knew what he was thinking. "Yeah, that Logan," I confirmed. "We're just catching up, trying some good food. Should be nice." Chris stood there frozen for a moment, still holding his keys, and I could practically see the gears turning in his head as he processed this information. For someone who'd spent months telling me that dinner with an ex was perfectly normal professional behavior, he looked remarkably uncomfortable with the idea of me doing the exact same thing. Walking into that steakhouse with Logan felt like stepping into a completely different universe, one where I could actually breathe and enjoy someone's company without constantly analyzing every word or gesture. Logan looked great in this casual blazer and jeans combo that was perfectly appropriate without trying too hard, and he was telling me this hilarious story about a building inspection gone wrong when the inspector fell through a ceiling tile. We were both laughing as the hostess led us to our table, and that's when I saw them. Chris and Vanessa tucked away at this intimate booth in the back corner that was definitely not the kind of setup you choose for a professional meeting. My stomach dropped like I just missed a step going downstairs, but I tried to keep my expression neutral as Logan continued his story, completely unaware of the drama unfolding 30 feet away. Vanessa looked exactly like I'd expected from Chris's descriptions, tall, impeccably dressed in this red dress that screamed date night rather than business meeting, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of confidence that comes from closing million-dollar deals. But what caught my attention wasn't Vanessa. It was watching Chris in action, seeing him operate in what he claimed was purely professional mode. He was leaning across the table toward her, his hand occasionally touching hers as he spoke, laughing at whatever real estate wisdom she was sharing with this deep, intimate laugh I recognized from our early dating days. His body language was speaking fluent attraction while his mouth was probably discussing interest rates and amortization schedules. Every few minutes he'd run his hand through his hair in that way he does when he's trying to look casually attractive, and Vanessa was responding to it like a woman who knew exactly what those gestures meant. This was not how business dinners looked in my world, where handshakes were firm, conversation stayed focused, and nobody needed to lean in close enough to smell each other's cologne. Logan noticed my distraction and followed my gaze. "Oh wow, is that your boyfriend over there?" he asked quietly, his engineering brain immediately calculating the awkwardness of this situation. "Yeah, that's Chris," I said, trying to sound casual while my heart was hammering against my ribs. "He's having a business meeting with his ex." Logan raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything else, which I appreciated because I was already feeling stupid enough without someone else pointing out how obvious this whole situation was. That's when Chris looked up from whatever fascinating mortgage discussion he was having and made direct eye contact with me across the restaurant. His face went through about 6 different emotions in the span of 3 seconds: surprise, panic, guilt, anger, embarrassment, and then this forced professional smile that looked physically painful to maintain. I watched him say something quick to Vanessa, who glanced over at our table with genuine confusion, clearly wondering why her dinner companion had suddenly become distracted from their important business conversation. My phone buzzed almost immediately. "What are you doing here?" Followed by, "This is so inappropriate, and then can you please just leave?" I showed Logan the texts and he shook his head with this knowing look. Wow, he's really committed to this professional meeting story, isn't he? I typed back, enjoying dinner with Logan. Don't let us interrupt your business. The next text came faster. Rachel, this is really important for my deal. You're making this weird. I could see Chris trying to refocus on Vanessa, but he kept glancing over at our table every few minutes, his professional composure clearly cracking under the pressure of being observed. Vanessa was starting to notice his distraction, following his gaze to our table and looking increasingly puzzled as Chris's attention kept drifting away from whatever multi-million-dollar financing they were supposed to be structuring. Then something interesting happened. Vanessa leaned back in her seat, crossed her arms, and I could see her mouth forming words that looked a lot like, "Is that your girlfriend?" Chris's response involved a lot of hand gestures and what appeared to be rapid explanations, but Vanessa's expression was shifting from confused to clearly annoyed. She stood up abruptly, gathering her purse with the kind of controlled anger I recognized from my own mirror. Chris reached for her arm, trying to get her to sit back down, but she shook him off and walked straight toward the ladies' room. As she passed our table, she made eye contact with me for just a second, and in that moment, I saw recognition dawn on her face. Not of who I was, but of what was happening. Chris sat alone at his table for about 10 minutes, furiously texting, checking his phone, looking toward the restroom, then back at our table. When Vanessa finally returned, she'd clearly been crying despite obvious attempts to fix her makeup. She didn't sit back down. Instead, she said something to Chris that made his face go completely white, then walked out of the restaurant without looking back. Chris asked for the check immediately, paid it with shaking hands, and left without even glancing in our direction. The whole thing had taken less than an hour. Logan, bless him, waited until Chris was gone before saying, "So, I'm guessing that wasn't really a business meeting?" "No," I said, feeling this strange mix of vindication and sadness. "No, it wasn't." Friday morning arrived like a storm I'd been tracking on the radar for months, and I woke up knowing this was the day everything would finally come crashing down. Chris hadn't come home Thursday night. He'd texted some excuse about needing space to think, but his car was in my driveway when I got up at 6 a.m. He was sitting at my kitchen table with coffee he'd made himself, looking like he hadn't slept at all. The cologne from last night had faded, leaving him looking smaller, deflated, nothing like the confident banker who'd walked out of here in his Tom Ford suit just yesterday. The silence stretched between us for what felt like hours before I finally broke it. "So how did your professional dinner go?" I asked, pouring myself coffee and trying to keep my voice steady. He looked up at me with bloodshot eyes. "Vanessa told me she's been seeing someone for 3 months. She thought I knew. She thought we were just friends doing business." I sat down across from him, and something about his defeated posture made all my suppressed anger bubble to the surface. "So you mean to tell me that while you were keeping me at arm's length, making me feel crazy for questioning your professional relationship, she had already moved on and you were the only one who didn't know?" It wasn't like that," he started, but his voice cracked on the words. "Then, what was it like, Chris? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been emotionally cheating on me with someone who wasn't even interested." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "I wasn't cheating on you, Rachel. Vanessa and I have a complicated professional history that you clearly don't understand. Stop lying to me, Chris. Stop lying to yourself." I stood up to match his energy. "I've been walking on eggshells for 7 months, questioning my own sanity because you keep telling me I'm imagining things that are right in front of my face." "I'm not lying about anything," he snapped, but his voice was desperate now. "Vanessa is an important business contact, and if you can't handle—" "She didn't even know we were exclusive," I interrupted, my voice rising. "Logan ran into her in the parking lot after you left. She apologized to him for the awkward situation. She said she had no idea you had a girlfriend. She thought you were single." Chris. Available. That's what you've been telling her for 7 months. The color completely drained from his face, and for the first time since I'd known him, he had no smooth explanation, no way to reframe this in his favor. What exactly have you been telling Vanessa about us, Chris? The question hung in the air like a loaded weapon. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I might have minimized our relationship. I told her we were keeping things casual. Casual? The word came out like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. We've been together for 7 months, Chris. You have a drawer at my place. We spent Christmas with your parents. What part of that screams casual to you? I needed to keep my options open professionally, he said. And even he seemed to realize how pathetic that sounded. Vanessa controls so much of the commercial real estate market. If she thought I was completely unavailable— You mean if she knew the truth? I corrected. If she knew you had a girlfriend, she might have maintained appropriate boundaries and you couldn't keep hoping something might happen between you two. He broke down then. Not crying exactly, but crumbling. I didn't mean for it to go on this long. I thought maybe if I kept things ambiguous, if the timing was ever right. You thought you could keep me as your safety net while waiting for your ex to want you back, I said, feeling disgusted with myself for not seeing it sooner. And the most pathetic part, she'd already moved on. You've been pining for someone who wasn't even thinking about you romantically. I was already reaching for my phone, blocking his number before he could say another word. We're done, Chris. Get your stuff and get out. Don't call me. Don't text me. Don't show up at my office. I never want to see you again. 8 weeks later, the Charlotte banking and real estate gossip mill had thoroughly processed the Chris and Vanessa drama. Logan and I were officially dating, taking things slow but honest this time, and he'd heard through his professional network that Chris's reputation had taken a serious hit. Apparently, Vanessa was furious when she found out the whole truth. Not just that he'd hidden having a girlfriend, but that he'd been using their professional relationship to try to rekindle something romantic. She'd told several other agents and lenders in their network about his behavior. In an industry built on trust and relationships, word traveled fast about loan officers who couldn't maintain professional boundaries. His referrals from top agents started drying up. The networking events became awkward when people knew the real story. His attempts to reach out through mutual contacts fell flat because everyone could see the manipulation for what it was. Logan and I ran into him at a coffee shop in South End about 3 months later. He looked different. Older, tired, alone. He tried to approach, maybe hoping for some kind of closure conversation, but I just shook my head and kept walking. Some bridges burn themselves, and this was one fire I had no interest in putting out. And if you made it this far with me, first of all, thank you for listening to my story. If this resonated with you, or if you've been through something similar, please hit that like button so this reaches someone else who might need to hear it. And if you want to hear more stories about navigating modern relationships and trusting your gut, consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next one. Take care.